Denver Broncos Super Bowl 58 win, Bo.
Oh my God, it's closed. It's so close. I don't know if there's a thing less than closed, but it's closed. And here's why. First of all,
starting off the AFC with a bang too.
I got on Justin's show last year.
This Justin?
Yes, the hashtag This Justin Sports Show. Phenomenal show. Go check it out. The day after it was announced, maybe it was the day of, I can't remember. I think it was the day after it was announced that Russell Wilson was heading to Denver. And I looked in this camera here with a straight face and told everybody that will listen that the Denver Broncos were not going to make the playoffs.
I was right there with you.
Wouldn't you know, the Denver Broncos did not make the playoffs last season. And I explained that, and people go, oh, well, it doesn't matter. Look, when you are bringing in a new head coach and you're bringing in a new defensive coordinator and you're bringing in all this new stuff, that
selling the team
matters, bro. Like all that turnover, you're changing it all. Oh, it didn't matter because you still got Pat Surtain. And look, no disrespect to those guys, but it mattered. Mm-hmm. Now, what have they done? They're bringing in a new head coach. They're bringing in an entire new coaching staff. And while Sean Payton has a much better pedigree than Nathaniel Hackett does, and while I would hope for the sake of Denver, I would hope for the sake of Sean Payton, I would hope especially for the sake of Russell Wilson that they win more games and are competitive. Right. I can't sit here and tell you with a straight face confidently that I even think their Super Bowl window is half open. Yep. I can't do it to you. And here's why. They're not better than the Chiefs.
Right.
They're not better than the Bills.
Right.
They're not better than the Bengals. Right. I don't think they'll be better than a Ravens with a healthy Lamar Jackson. You can argue whether or not they'll be better than the Dolphins or the Jets, and I know we'll talk about them later. I don't think they're better than the Jaguars. The Denver Broncos.
Damn.
Will they be a playoff team?
I can't push back though with how things have been recently. I mean, you know? Look, like maybe I'd push back on the Jets and Dolphins, but I get your claims. Sure. You know?
And if you want to push back on the Jets and Dolphins, I understand because the Jets, it's a bunch of things happening. We don't know what it looks like on the field. The on the field product's not there yet. If you don't want to push back on the Jets, I'll give you that. If you don't push back on the Dolphins, I'll give you that too. But what I would rebuttal and say is when Tua was healthy, and his brain wasn't scrambled eggs, not only was he an MVP candidate, but the Dolphins were one of the best teams in football. And they were undefeated.
One of the hottest offenses.
One of the hottest offenses in football. I think when you look at what was happening with him when he was healthy before the first concussion, and then especially before the second one, in every major statistical category, that was one of, if not the best passing offense in football. And rightfully so, because disgusting. You have Tyreek Hill and you have Jalen Waddle, you've got Tua Tagovailoa. Understandably so. When I look at the Denver Broncos, what I'm saying is there's a lot of pressure on this football team. There's a lot of pressure on Russell Wilson, not just because he threw a stinker last season, but now he's bringing in a first ballot Hall of Fame head coach in Sean Payton to help him clean up his mess. And as you mentioned at the top of the show for the teaser, he's addicted to winning a Super Bowl. That doesn't even take into consideration the fact that the kings of the mountain reside in your division. In the AFC West, which means in order for you to win a championship, guess who you have to beat? You got to beat Andy Reid, Pat Mahomes, and Travis Kelce. How many teams in the
and they never played a road playoff game?
How many? They haven't. They haven't been on the road. So what you're telling me is in 5 years, they're not coming to Arrowhead. They're not coming to Mile High. You're going to Arrowhead.
You're going to Arrowhead.
Here's a crazy stat for you: Pat Mahomes, undefeated on the road in the AFC West. He's never lost in Denver. He's never lost in LA. He's never lost in Oakland/Vegas. So even if it's a playoff game in Denver, well, history would tell you that if Pat Mahomes is coming to town and you're an AFC West team, you're going to lose that game.
Right.
I understand the talent. I recognize the talent. Don't get me wrong. I recognize who they have on the roster. I understand what they did to beef up that O-line. And I thought what they did bringing in McGlinchey and the other guy that they brought in who I can't think of at the top of my head right now. Yes. Amazing. Makes perfect sense. There's too many eyes on this football team and there's too much pressure. What's the one thing and I'll wrap up. What's the one thing everybody said about the move to Russell Wilson? Well, the Denver Broncos haven't had competent football play at the quarterback position since Peyton Manning retired.
Yep.
Russell Wilson's going to deliver that. Well, it's been 1 year of Russell Wilson and he hasn't looked any better than Drew Lock or any of the other guys that they've had under center in Denver since Peyton Manning has left. And he might have looked worse, which is absolutely unfortunate. Yep. So what I'm saying to you is I'm not doubting the talent and I'm not doubting the ability. But when I look at the Denver Broncos, what they brought on the field last season and specifically who they have to go through in a very stacked AFC. Forget the AFC. In the AFC West, like they're not winning the division, and I don't know if they're going to be able to go. They're not going to be able to go into Arrowhead and win a football game. There's only two teams that have gone into Arrowhead in the playoffs and won: the Patriots back in 2018. Tom Brady was the quarterback, and the Cincinnati Bengals again with Joe Burrow a couple years ago. Those are the only two teams that have gone to Arrowhead and won a playoff game. Last time I checked, Tom Brady doesn't play for the Broncos, and neither does Joe Burrow. I think the Broncos Super Bowl window is closed right now. As the season progresses, could they play themselves into the conversation? 100%. I'm not saying they can't play themselves into the conversation, but if you're asking me today, July 5th at 8:31 Eastern Standard Time, I'm gonna say it's closed, and I have no problem with it. I'll die on the hill.
Yeah, no, that's totally okay. I was one of the few people that was right there with you last year too. I mean, new head coach, new quarterback. And this was my biggest thing. I said, first of all, those are two very pivotal, positions to change. But when you sell a team for the most ever, and who you sell them to, like business moguls, the heirs of Walmart. Like if y'all didn't know, the people who created Walmart, their son bought the Broncos. Just kind of a short story there for everyone. So they were going through a lot, right? So no, I'm right there with you, and I hated to see that happen for Russell Wilson. Like I didn't even want to watch the Broncos last year to see how Russell Wilson was doing because he had put the bad taste in everyone's mouth off the rip. I mean, it kind of set the tone losing to Seattle, and you can't even call the timeout. And then Geno Smith drops the whole, I wrote me off. They didn't write back. I think Nathaniel Hackett didn't call the timeout correctly in that game because the next game you have the whole damn crowd counting down the play clock for you to make sure that you manage it. I hear you want it being closed, absolutely. Even if Russell Wilson returned to 80% of what he was before he got like this, how is the bad season really going to affect that version of Russell Wilson that we have coming forward? And maybe there is a little bit of Sean Payton bias thrown into this, but knowing what Sean Payton did with the Saints, I feel like walking into a lot less. Now he's walking into this with Russell Wilson, so he's going to have some retoolage to do. He spent money on the offensive line. He spent money in free agency. He got to pick his staff. If Vic Fangio would have came over, that would have been absolutely great. Of course, we see him go and reside with the Dolphins. Brian Flores, of course, with the Minnesota Vikings. But when you look at the roster of this NFL team, it's undeniable. You look at the defense, you look at what's on the offensive side of the ball, you look at, yes, Russell Wilson did not play good, but I've been saying it all offseason since I started the show, going into the 29th episode here. Russell Wilson and Sean Payton are going to bring things out of each other's game that I think we've never seen before, in the combination of Russell Wilson's athleticism and just grit for the game, combined with Sean Payton's intelligence, and we're going to talk about him a little bit later as well. Combined with that, I believe it has to be at least half open, and I totally hear you. The mountain is with the Kansas City Chiefs. Look at the AFC, how stacked, maybe it's ever been. When you look at, just the division in general, it's going to be tough. But if the Broncos come out next year and win 10 or 11 games, I'm not shocked, because I believe they're going to have a good turnaround. Now, again, it's not going to be one. I don't see them being in the Super Bowl next year. But the teams that I had put on here, and just kind of before we get any deeper, I don't know if I said this on the show, the teams, I selected the teams. Marcus didn't. He just walked into them with me on the show. The teams I selected, if any of these teams represented their conference, obviously AFC or NFC, in the Super Bowl this year, it wouldn't surprise me, because of how much we've been keeping up with these teams, because of how much has happened in the offseason, and realistically what all of these teams that we're going through present. And if the Broncos being inside of that, if they made it, I wouldn't be shocked. Now, I'm probably not going to say they're going to win it, but again, we don't know depending on how the NFC does turn out. So I'm going to say half open for the Broncos there.